Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Eric Foley with Earth Advantage. I'm the Senior Manager of Certifications, and I'm happy to join you all and talk about something that matters very much to all of us. I appreciate your attention. I'm also a little bit of a building scientist, so I'm conducting a little bit of an experiment during this presentation. You're all a participant, so hopefully you consent, but don't worry, I'm not doing anything that's going to hurt you, but it is going to educate you. So this is a monitor that's looking at the carbon dioxide in this room, and there are certain levels that are good for your mental awareness, and those are going to make you sleepy. We're right now about the sleepy part, so hopefully you stay focused during the presentation, and we'll probably need to talk with the owners of this place about maybe getting the ventilation up so that it's a little bit better for everyone's attention and health. See if this works. Nope. All right, I'm gonna have to ask for, yeah, thank you. So we'll see how this goes because there's going to be a lot of slides that we'll be covering through. All right, if you could put it through to the welcome slide. One more time. All right, perfect, thank you. So 500,000 people for housing, over 500,000 housing units in Oregon are estimated to be needed in the next 20 years in Oregon. And more than half of Oregon renters cannot afford basic needs like food, transportation, internet access, or childcare after paying rent. We have supply chain challenges, delays in entitlements. We have lengthy permitting processes, labor shortages, and complex financing structures. So what can be done? We believe investing in people and places, working smarter, thinking creatively, and around funding sources and accessibility are the missing pieces, and together we'll find the solutions for housing, for equity, for the environment in Oregon. So let's begin. So we need to think about materials beyond the aspects of just materials and expand those perspectives. And we need to understand, like, what does sustainability actually mean? It means different things to different people. We also need to go away from the aspects of consumption to something where we're restoring the environment, restoring communities. There's tools that are available to all of you free to evaluate your spaces and think about how we can either create new spaces or fix spaces that we have. So I did a tool for Laker City, because a lot of times the conversations are about centric. And I also did one for Central Oregon as well, looking about how we would move those towards higher efficiency things. So we need to focus on buildings in terms of passive strategies. A lot of the discussions are often about high efficiency equipment. Think about the structure first and move beyond that to those renewables. So we're setting goals and we're working towards a plan and we're working together. And I have a quick video here before I pass it on to my panelists to continue the conversation about integrated design. So we'll see how this works. Perhaps it doesn't. Nope. See if you can get the video to work. Thank you. So I'll get the video to work. I'll just give you a synopsis of it. And later on, you can read about this thing. So basically, it goes through integrative design. So we're thinking about the process from collaborative efforts early on through the design, construction, ownership, and process. So that's what this video did. We'll just move along. We don't have time for this. Thank you. There we go. Hello, well, there's my picture. I'm Andrew Coles. I'm president and CEO of Coles Construction. So we are a local commercial general contractor here. Our company was founded in 1997 by my father and Ron Coles Jr. I'm Roberta and Aaron's eldest son. I am a middle child. My sister is the oldest. I'm Lindsay's husband. If you know my wife, I really am Lindsay's husband. Most people refer to me as Lindsay's husband. I'm like the second string. She's cooler than me. And then I'm Drew and Remy's dad. So I have two little boys, one 2 years old and one 7. Keep me busy. So I talked about it. The company was established in 1997. And really, the goal when my father founded the company was his mission, and that was to build an equitable company that would really create a new standard in the construction industry. So since that point, I really believe that our company has become that. We really have set the standard about equitable construction and just business ownership in general. And we're proud of that. I'm sorry, I'm having to do it on both sides. So one of the things that I like to always talk about when we're referring to sustainability is the 3 pillars. So a lot of people think about sustainability and the environmental impacts of what sustainability is. So if you think about the environmental impacts, you think about reduction of water use in buildings, you think about high efficient HVAC systems. You think about solar panels on building. You think about energy efficient windows and systems in buildings. Well, that's just one of the 3 pillars of sustainability. So when we as a company think about sustainability, we really focus on all 3 elements equally because they're equally important. So the other element, the other pillar is social responsibility. And then the last pillar is economic responsibility. So kind of diving a little deeper, when you think about social responsibility, you think about in the buildings and projects that we're all designing and building, how can we create opportunities for individuals in our community? How do you take a building and make a young girl see that building as a future job opportunity? How do they think about this whole industry, whether it's the architectural side, the engineering side, the construction side, as an opportunity? And if you do it right, you're not only building buildings or designing buildings, you're creating that social opportunity for economic impact in the overall community. And when you think about economic impact for us as a general contractor, we, maybe 90% of the work, 85% of the work that we do is subcontracted out. So we'll self-perform concrete on our projects, but the other 85% of the work is being subcontracted. So how do we help not only identify new businesses that haven't had opportunities to participate, but how do we help them grow and scale? And how do we help that workforce within those companies see the start of a project as the start of the future? How do you inspire a young kid to see this industry and see themselves being in a leadership position? And that's really, when it comes down to it, what we see as sustainability. And the way that you go about doing that is you create equitable procurement strategies. You create transparent monitoring and evaluation. You create employer partnerships. And when you think about that, what does that look like? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. And one of my panelists, we just met here today, but what was exciting was that he was at our office 2 weeks ago on a panel
for a nonprofit that one of the executives of our company founded, actually Mark Daniel at the moment that's over there. It's a nonprofit called the Blueprint Foundation. And when he founded that organization, of course, he has a full-time job and he works every day a lot. But he saw it as an opportunity to create a foundation with others that was focused on Black and brown kids within this community and giving them access and opportunities to seed all types of industry. So every single weekend, every Saturday, they go on a field trip. And it may be going out to the beach and the coast. It may be going out to the forest. And it may be coming to one of our projects. And through that, every single Saturday, 30 kids come and meet at 9 o'clock and get on a bus and go on one of these adventures. These are kids that range from anywhere from 5 all the way up to high school. And so what you're doing is you're creating a vision, and these kids are able to see themselves in all these visions that they participate. One of the most inspiring things for me to do is to do one of those tours and to talk to kids about what does it look like to be the president of a company? Well, it means you're solving a lot of problems. I mean, when it comes down to it, but you're able to talk to kids and tell them how you get there. And you're also able to show them all the different lanes in which they can become entrepreneurs on their own, or become executives, or become incredible tradespeople. And I think for that is really when you think about sustainability, that's what it means. There's an example of a project that we won maybe, I think it was in 2017. And when you talk about those three things that I talked about, procurement process and equitable opportunities, and then what does that do for the community? It was the Oregon Convention Center, and that project, it's a big project. Typical RFPs, especially with public sector, limit a company like ours from even being able to think about responding to an RFP. They created an equitable process that didn't limit the opportunity by saying, give us 5 examples of convention centers that you've remodeled in the last 5 years, and please tell us the superintendent and project manager and project engineer that participated on those, right? Like, well, from the start, if that was the way that they went about that process, that just pretty much leaves it to the largest construction companies in the United States, right? Because there's only a few that could have that experience. Instead, they ask questions like, tell us why you think your team will be successful at managing a project like this. Tell us some experiences that you've had in previous projects that relate to this. So what we were able to do, we had worked on an airport project, and those are active, and people are around. So we were able to talk about how we made sure the people were safe, and we were able to talk about the project manager, and to use our experience to say why we were the best contractor for that project. In the end, we ended up being successful. We won the project. We beat, I won't say who, but one of the largest companies in the Northwest. It was a proud moment for us. And when we did that, not only did we finish the project on time and on budget, and I know everybody else here's contractors saying that, but Metro actually put that on their website, so it's actually real. We also achieved the highest levels of economic participation in history. Over 60% of the contractors that were on those projects were businesses that were owned by people of color. The average contract size was $2 million. So these aren't little contracts, these are large projects. We finished it ahead of schedule, and we finished it on budget. So when you think about that, and when you saw that last picture that I put up there, that's what the workforce looks like, right? That's what equity really is. That's when you're creating opportunities, that's what it looks like. And during that entire project, I remember Martin was able to bring individuals from the Blueprint Foundation. So all these young men and women that are, like I said, from the age of 5 all the way up to high school. And they're seeing people that look like them in all positions. They're seeing them in the trades. They're seeing them as project engineers. They're seeing them as project managers. They're seeing them as superintendents. They're seeing them as owners of large-scale companies. And that, when you break it down, is what sustainability really is. So we need to reshape and refocus what we mean by sustainability. It's not only solar panels. Those are important. It's all the avenues. And if we do that right, we're going to start to help to take the next generation of youth that are living in affordable housing and help them be that next generation that changes the cycle for their families. And that's it for me.
Welcome, everyone. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is James Matoir. I'm the Executive Director of Inner City Collaborative. We're a new nonprofit that started a little over a year ago. And our mission is really to ensure the health, financial, and environmental benefits of a clean energy economy are fully realized in Black, Indigenous, people of color, frontline, and underserved communities. And so when you take that step back of really looking at what does that mean, we're really looking at really trying to build durable wealth within the community and really focus on our partnerships with the communities that you see up here. So we're specifically looking at to help the residential sector, right? So, there's a lot of funding that's coming down for new construction, commercial, but we're really focusing in and honing in on existing homes. How do you make existing homes more energy efficient, safer, sustainable, healthy? So building those partnerships within those organizations. So community-based organizations, we're working with groups like African American Alliance of Home Ownership, Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, Taking Ownership. These are the organizations that have a connection to the communities that they serve. So we have the folks who need the work done on the homes. So now let's work with the contractors, the minority contractors who are doing this work, right? So we're working with groups that are looking to have their contractor membership start doing work in the residential sector and helping those folks become aware of the opportunities in this sector. So, there's a lot of funding coming down the pipeline, and a lot of this funding, whether that's through local avenues, through avenues like Portland Clean Energy Fund, whether that's avenues through Oregon Department of Energy, or even at the federal level, Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of funding coming down the pipeline for contractors and business owners to be aware of the opportunities in this space and to position their businesses to be a part of this clean energy economy. And as workforce development and a trainer, we're looking to help those contractors see those opportunities. And then last but not least, and this I'm very excited about, is really working with the folks that are coming into the industry. You take one of these pieces out, you don't have a program. If you have no homes to work on, where are you going to work? If you have no contractors to do the work, who's going to do the work? And then we also have the new workers that are coming into this sector. We really need to train them, show them career pathways on how they can succeed in this industry. So these are some of the workforce development training partners that we work with. You can see some of the folks on here, like we were just talking about Blueprint Foundation. We work with them to deliver multiple avenues, whether that's training, different certifications. A lot of these organizations, by the way, offer wraparound services for their trainees that come out of their programs. So if you're a contractor in the room, highly suggest you start looking at some of these programs, because when you get a student or a trainee that's coming out of these programs, you're getting someone who might have access to childcare for 2 to 3 years after they graduate, that might have access to food stipends, that might have access to further training to move up in the company that you've hired them for. So I think this is a really underutilized resource when you, as a contractor or maybe working within a program, to reach out to these programs to find new folks to come into the space. We're also offering the students that are coming out of these programs job shadowing opportunities. What's it like, for somebody who wants to get into the industry that's like an energy auditor? What's it like to be an actual weatherization installer? What's it like to be a solar panel installer? You need to give folks that actual on-the-job experience, because one of the things for me, it's like, hey, maybe I don't like doing that. That's a really good piece of information to know as well. I don't like getting on roofs, right? So you're not going to go that way, but it steers you in a different way in the industry. That way, you know what you potentially want to keep seeking out and what type of job you want in the industry. we adhere to this model of like earn while you learn. You know, you can look at this. Folks going into four-year colleges, they're paying to get that knowledge. In the construction industry, you have this aspect of people being able to earn money while they are learning a trade, while they are learning a skill set. And this is really helping those folks set up to not be in debt when they're getting done with like a four-year program, or they're getting done with their training program. One of the other things that we're doing at Intercity Collaborative is we are sitting on the Portland Clean Energy Fund, High Roads Advisory Council, in order to make sure that we're keeping high standards, high wages for folks that are coming into this industry. We're offering internships, paid stipends, career coaching, in-field mentorships, and last but not least, scholarships. We have really focused in on these five specific pathways into the industry. Once again, we're very residential focused of the work that we're doing. We need more carpenters. We need retrofit installers. So we need the folks who are going in crawl spaces, attics, installing insulation, air sealing homes. We need folks doing home energy scoring and rating. You know, we're here talking about energy efficiency in buildings. As we all should know, none of this work gets done unless there's an audit pre-work and another one done post-work. We need more folks in this sector. So we're focusing on trying to help folks understand where the pathways into the industry. And then last but not least, HVAC and heat pump water heaters. So one second here. So with our partners, Earth Advantage, with funding from Energy Trust of Oregon and the Portland Clean Energy Fund, we've created the Oregon Residential Career Hub. And so with this hub, it's a website that is meant to help bridge the gap between employers and new workers in the residential energy efficiency industry. Now, there are other websites that are out there that are very much like this, but they're very much geared toward the commercial sector. And we launched this new hub because we noticed this was missing for the residential sector, specifically here in our market. We are now hearing from many partners, as well as other workforce coalitions and councils, that this information is in dire need. And so the timing was well suited for this industry. So within this industry, or within the website, we're giving folks information for different career paths. What does it cost to take the training? How long is the training? What are the pros of getting in that industry? What are the cons of getting in that industry, right? It's really the information overall, if you're new to the industry, and even kind of helping folks get into that middle tier project management level. What are the opportunities as you go to get into the industry? It's also a place where we wanted to define that career path. You know, me getting into the industry over 10 years ago, I just kind of lucked upon a system. There was a lot of funding, ARA funding back in the day that really helped me get, you know, to a career. And so this is really helping define that career pathway, because it was very ambiguous when I got into the industry, and folks need that kind of defined career path. Even if they don't take that set career path, it's a good guide. It's a good milestone to say, you know. And if you keep going down that path, what you kind of learn is like, wow, I took 2 classes, but that's opened up 8 different opportunities for me in the industry, right? It really opens up those doors and pathways into the industry. It's also great for contractors because they can post jobs and also get involved with a lot of the workforce development work that we're doing. This next slide is really showing some of the minority contractors that we're working with. And so we're working with groups like Latino Built, Home Performance Guild, Northwest Native Chamber, NAMAC, and PBDG, and really helping their contractors understand, once again, what are those opportunities in this space. And so really helping those contractors understand that, hey, if you're working on siding and doors, it's not going to be a big pivot to say, hey, you can really start doing wall insulation. What does that look like? Or if you're working on roofs, do you want to start doing insulation and air sealing up in attics? These are other avenues that you can increase your services and you know, be more successful, especially as there's funding for these energy efficiency upgrades. And with that, I will pass it over. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry. I was hitting the wrong one. There we go. All right. Yeah, there you go.
Hello. Hello. My name is Wendy Kelfkin. I'm with the Portland Clean Energy Fund. How many folks have heard of the Portland Clean Energy Fund? Awesome. How many people know what it is? Almost as many hands. Okay, awesome. One more question. Any architects in the room? Okay, no mean jokes about architects. How come it didn't go forward when I? Oh, I got it. Okay. I didn't even. Yeah, you do that. Okay. For most of you, this will be a little bit of a review. Okay, so what is the Portland Clean Energy Fund? We invest in climate action that advances racial, social, and climate justice. The Portland Clean Energy Fund was a ballot measure that was passed by 65% of Portland voters in November of 2018. It's the first climate fund measure created and led by communities of color in the US. It generates $100 million or more annually for clean energy investments in Portland. Where that money comes from is a 1% gross receipts surcharge on Portland sales by corporations with $1 billion, at least $1 billion in sales nationally, and at least $500,000 in Portland. Okay, this is a little journey of Portland Clean Energy Fund. So the initiative passed in 2018. We put out 2 RFPs so far for what we call community responsive grants. And then there was a city council code change because what was happening was we were getting a lot more money than we thought we were going to get. When the voters passed the initiative, we thought maybe we'd get $30 to $40 million a year. We're getting these, turns out these corporations are doing really, really well right now. And we're getting more like $110, $120 million a year. So I'm sure you've all read the headlines in the Oregonian. They've been having a really fun time talking about how we have hordes of money piling up. So we are writing a plan. We have written a plan about how to spend that money. It's called the PSEF Climate Investment Plan. Where we are right now, we're actually on time, if you can imagine that, which I was not today, is we're right in here. So tomorrow, City Council will do a second reading on the Climate Investment Plan, and hopefully, everybody cross your fingers, they will approve it, and then we'll be off to the races. What will happen very soon after that is we'll launch our third call for community responsive grants, and we'll start launching our strategic programs. I'll talk a little bit about what the difference between those are. Before I move on, the Climate Investment Plan, what is it? A 5-year plan that sets funding priorities and levels, what we are funding, outcomes and goals for community responsive grants and strategic programs. You heard me mention those. How much? Allocations for community responsive grants and strategic programs. We heard from Andrew about what we should be doing. We heard from James about how we get the right people to do it. Let's talk about how we're going to pay for it. Everything in the Climate Investment Plan got there through this equity and climate framework. So we considered each one of these elements. Are there benefits to frontline communities? Will the program create clear, significant, and measurable benefit to frontline communities? Community leadership, super important to PSEF. Are there meaningful opportunities for community members to participate in decision-making and or provide leadership in program implementation? Does the program invest in building capacity within communities most impacted? So it's not just the same people doing the same things. How do we bring up new capacity? Implementation feasibility. Can the program be realistically implemented at scale with existing city staff, partners, or contractors over the next 5 years? Climate impact. Greenhouse gas reductions. At our core, we are a greenhouse gas reduction program. We have to see those greenhouse gas reductions from the work that we do. Will the program result in meaningful and measurable greenhouse gas reductions and sequestration? And then finally, accountability. Do accountability mechanisms exist to ensure that communities of color, low-income populations, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable communities benefit from the strategic program that we've designed? Is this program additional or existing or a planned additional to existing or planned efforts? Okay, here's how we divided up the funding. We've got 7 funding categories, 750 million. Vast majority of it, 63%, is going into renewable energy and energy efficiency. And to Andrew's point, we probably should have those reversed because it's not just solar panels. 17% into transportation decarbonization. This is a little bit new for us. When PSEF was first launched, we were very building focused, but we've definitely heard from the community that there is interest in incorporating transportation elements. And we'll talk about what some of those are. Green infrastructure, trees, shade, use of water, keeping water out of the stormwater system. Capacity building, talked a little bit about this, helping small community based organizations grow in their capacity to do this work. Climate jobs. So this is a 6% investment. 6% of 750 million is not too shabby. I can't do the math immediately, but if anybody else can, just shout it out. And then regenerative agriculture. So this is urban agriculture that is, in some cases, it's first foods. In some cases, it's actual like community gardening. There's a lot of different iterations of this in Portland. Okay, so this is where you're going to see the majority of the money that might be applicable to your projects. Community responsive grants. So what a community responsive grant is eligible applicants are nonprofit organizations. They come to us during an open RFP with an idea of something that they want to do. It is not a program that we've designed. It is wide open for you to bring us a proposal that saves greenhouse gas emissions and centers social and racial justice. From a housing perspective, creating direct benefits for your tenants, super important. We've had a lot of projects come to us, especially solar projects, because getting solar benefit to tenants is really hard in a multifamily affordable housing scenario. And so when you're not finding a way to get benefits directly to those tenants, it gets a little bit harder for us to fund. Okay, so then we have our strategic programs. These are programs that we have set up and funded that are a little bit more prescriptive, where we've said, okay, there is a need. There is a need for clean energy in regulated multifamily affordable housing. So we put $60 million into that bucket. That fund is being administered by Portland Housing Bureau. You do not have to, your project does not have to be funded by the Housing Bureau in order to access that money. But you do have to be funded by PHB or OHCS. And if there's anything else out there that I don't know about where you have a covenant, an affordability covenant that's at least for at least 30 years, any other kind of funding that gives you that level of an affordability covenant, you can access this funding. You would still get it through PHB, but you don't have to also be PHB funded. And I'm happy to take questions as we go. So please let me know, throw your hand up. SP2. Clean energy in unregulated multifamily housing. So this is your naturally occurring affordable housing. We're actually trying to phase that out because we think it makes it sound far too nice. This is unregulated multifamily housing that's being rented at the market rate that it is worth because it's not in great shape generally. So we have put $50 million into this kind of housing. We're going to run a pilot that we're putting together right now to try to figure out how to get landlords to come to the table to do upgrades in their buildings, because we are going to require some kind of commitment to rent stability. And we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. It'll probably be, we're going to, the amount of money that we'll put in per unit will be matched to the number of years of affordability that the landlord is willing to commit to. So that's what we're talking about doing. Okay. SP3, clean energy improvements in single family homes. This can be rental homes. This can be any affordable housing that you may have in your portfolio that is 4 units or less. $140 million, we're making investments of up to $50,000 per unit. Go ahead. Okay. Mhm. So really good point. So the question is, with SP2, what happens to the tenant? How do we, and so that's the other piece that we have to address. If there is a rent stability covenant, then how do we ensure that there isn't, I think this is what you're concerned about, premature eviction of that tenant so that they can raise the rent? Another great question. Where's the tenant go while this retrofitting is happening? I'm gonna maybe invite some of my co-panelists to answer this, but a lot of the stuff that we're talking about doing does not require, in a retrofit scenario, doesn't require people to move out of their housing. Would you agree with that?
That's true. If we could hold the questions to the end,
Or am I
Jenny?
going over on time?
Well, just so we can get through all the content.
Okay. Good question. But I do think, the kinds of upgrades especially for SP2, it's not necessarily cosmetic upgrades. It's things like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters that can be installed in a day. Okay. Single family homes up to 50,000 per unit. And this program is moving forward right now. This will be the first strategic initiative aside from SP1, which is already moving to come out as soon as we get council approval, hopefully tomorrow. Clean energy and small commercial buildings. We're doing a couple of things here. First, we are going to provide incentives to small business owners to replace inefficient appliances, the kinds of things that travel with the business owner. And then we are also going to do building upgrades for buildings that are 40,000 square feet or less that have a tenant that is a member of one of the PSEF priority populations and a commitment to a long-term tenancy. And then finally, building upgrades for community severe weather response. So eligible applicants for this will be nonprofits and government. I think, and we're talking about this right now, but for affordable housing, what I would like to see happen, what I'm advocating for, is that some of this $30 million could be applied to the common areas of your buildings, as long as you were willing to open them up during times of climate emergency to allow your tenants to go there. So that's something we're talking about, is if you accessed this funding and you also access funding for your individual units in SP1, would we be able to do that? And we're working on that. This is kind of a primer for you. You're going to get these slides. I made this table that shows all of the programs, and so that you can figure out where does your project fit. And so when you get the slides later, this is for you. I'm going to go through all of this in much more detail tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and hopefully a little bit slower. So if you would like to know more, and also I'll be talking about green infrastructure dollars and transportation dollars that we could get into your developments as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'll try to do this quickly and get us through to some discussion, because I'm very excited to hear from you all. But essentially, I want to give you an overview of kind of what's happening at the federal and state level with some funding that might be relevant to some of the projects we've discussed, and to Oregon and Portland and everyone's climate goals as a whole. Before we start, my name is Will Mulhern. I'm an energy analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. I work on the energy efficiency and conservation team. I do a lot of our energy efficiency policy work. I also do some programs with our state buildings, kind of all over the place, but would look forward to meeting many of you after this.
So to start, I think everyone who's definitely aware of kind of the context we find ourselves in with investments in energy. But we have been sharing this slide a little bit from our office, and I think it does a great job of showing just how significant this moment kind of is for federal investment in energy. So we have a few different kind of decades split out here of how much federal investment there has been in the energy landscape broadly. And you can see from 2022 to 2027, so that's obviously projecting forward, but based primarily off the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a massive investment in energy across our country. And to really hammer that home, ARA, I think a lot of people here may have worked on that and are very familiar with ARA. It was a really significant and meaningful investment. This completely makes that look tiny, right? And you can see that. I think it's a nice figure to kind of set the context for this and talk about how important this work is. And I also want to emphasize that in this new era of funding, if you will, there's also the Justice 40 requirement. I believe there's a panel right now talking about Justice 40, but I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar. That's the White House executive order that says 40% of these benefits have to go to disadvantaged communities and to these frontline communities. And so I think that's also important context here in saying we're investing a historic amount of money in this. And we're also doing it in a way that is intentional to serve communities that have traditionally been harmed by the energy system and by other injustices that exist. And so I just want to really set the context for that before I jump into kind of more specifics on what's coming our way. So I won't worry too much about reading every single point of this. Again, you'll have the slides, but these are the opportunities that we're tracking at the Oregon Department of Energy. And we call ourselves ODO. Many of you probably know that. I'm going to slip back into that, but just so you know, ODO is the Oregon Department of Energy. I want to highlight a few kind of in the middle here. So under the application open, the ones that I work most closely on, and that I'm going to be probably discussing in the most detail, are homes. And here, these are both home efficiency rebate programs that are intended to help consumers make energy efficiency upgrades in their homes. And I'll talk about that on a subsequent slide. And also this contractor training grant, which I know when you see that number next to some of these other numbers might not seem like the most significant, but that's also a really meaningful investment in developing the workforce and following up on some of the things that have been discussed here today, figuring out how we can develop a community-focused workforce that can really deliver on these investments that are being made. There's some other ones that are maybe a bit flashier, and there's interest in the hydrogen hubs and things like that. Probably not going to spend too much detail talking about that. I'll also flag Solar for All, which I'm sure some folks here are maybe aware of. We're kind of in the final stages of putting together our application at the state to submit and hopefully hear back soon enough from the U.S. Department of Energy about whether or not we're successful with that program as well. So jumping into home energy rebates, like I said, this is kind of personally my bread and butter. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about it. It's also something that I think we've gotten the most questions in our office about because it's really made headlines nationwide. So as I mentioned, it's a historic investment in home energy efficiency in Oregon. Between these two programs, we're going to get $114 million. The key distinction between the two programs here, that stands for the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. It's had like 3 different names. So if you're getting confused, don't worry about that. But right now we're calling it here, and hopefully that's here to stay. And that was not intentional, but I like it. Yeah. So that's an income qualified program. So that goes up to 150% of the area median income. There's an important caveat there in that between 80% and 150%, that's the middle income folks, that's half the total. That's half the rebate amount, essentially. And from 0% up to 80%, they're eligible for the full reimbursement of the entire project up to specific thresholds based on the technology. This is all easier for you to probably read and digest, and I have some resources in here that'll be easier to track that down. But essentially, it's important to note that that is for appliance rebates in homes, and it's income qualified in the way that I just laid out. The second program is the homes program. That's performance-based, so that's either based on modeled or measured savings. We're still getting further clarity from US DOE on what that looks like. As you might imagine, that's a pretty big undertaking, but also a really important and potentially powerful tool. That also has larger incentives for low-income households. So as we talked about with Justice 40, there's a really an emphasis on serving the communities that have historically been left out of these types of investments. And we want to make sure that we're carrying that through as we design these programs at the state level. I'll also flag, since there's been some good discussion on this so far, on workforce development. The contractor training grant is the big one that I had highlighted. We're applying for that formula grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. believe we'll submit that application early next year, and we're figuring out how we want that to look in Oregon. But right now, what we're thinking is we have so many great folks and organizations doing this work on the ground. We really want to build off that and support those existing organizations that are out there. So if this piques anyone's interest, please find me afterwards and we can have more detailed discussion about how we're thinking through some of this work and how we want to involve the community in making these decisions. There's also some state funding that's very similar from House Bill 3409. There's a large investment in a number of climate programs related to that. I can talk more about that in discussion if people have interest. And then within Solar for All and the home energy rebate programs, there's specific workforce requirements that kind of tie in. As you might imagine, we're going to be creating a lot of demand for these programs, and we want to make sure that we have people to do the work. Here's just some key questions to highlight. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think the kind of common themes are, as I've mentioned a few times, like we want this to really benefit the communities that have historically been left out of these types of investments and the people that we know are disproportionately impacted by injustices and the things that we have seen in society for so long. And so we want to make sure that as we're designing these programs and we're making these decisions, we're doing it in a way that's going to benefit these communities. And to do that, we want to make sure that we're doing the design of these programs in a community informed way. So I think on that note, we're sort of starting to kick off our process of program design and outreach. And actually next week, and there's more info on our website about this, but we'll be hosting a webinar on October 4th at 2 p.m. Where you can join in. We'll share out a little bit of this information, but we're really going to use that as a forum for the public to give input on how they would like to see these programs. And the following week on October 10th and 11th, we have 2 more webinars, one specific to each of the rebate programs that I've mentioned, where we're going to, again, solicit more feedback from key stakeholders and from the public to kind of understand what folks would like to see with these programs and kind of start that process of doing intentional community outreach and engagement to make sure that ultimately when we're ready to submit an application to U.S. Department of Energy, we've done that in a way that's been informed by all of Oregon. Yeah, there's some additional resources here. You'll see those in your slides as those are distributed, but that I don't want to take up any more time. So I want to jump into discussion, but thank you for the chance to speak here.
A little bit more questions. So I have a couple more things I'm going to cover here before we jump into discussions here, and I'm going to grab this, and that's a good setup there, Andrew. Clever, your part.
PowerPoint DJ.
Yeah, PowerPoint DJ. Yeah, for those of you that I'm a sprinter by nature, so I like to go fast. So we're going to do a little bit of a quick session here on things. Part of the reason for me putting so many slides on the back end of this was to give you resources after this discussion and start the conversations going forward. So if there's content that you're missing, don't worry, you'll get that later. But I wanted to cover a number of things. So we talked about how we need to be together on this. It's about collaboration of those efforts. We talked about sustainability beyond what the sustainability means. We talked about workforce development, and we started talking about some funding sources as well. One of those funding sources that I think was alluded to just briefly by Will is the GRRP. So for those of you that are not familiar with this HUD opportunity, there are weekly sessions on Wednesdays where they're giving information about it. It is a competitive process, so you can't talk to them directly. You have to go to these sessions, and I actually included PowerPoint presentations from those sessions in this, so we have that resources. But basically, there's about $40,000 to $80,000 per unit, $750,000 to $10 or $20 million for the cohorts that you could qualify for. Those are specifically for specific products that are being revitalized, and there are some construction components that also can be available. There's also the GRF program, and that's another $27 billion of investments. And I think there was a presentation earlier this week where we'll be going out the deeper dives of these things during the launching. But I wanted to give these resources to you as well, depending on your availability, because I know we know this as well as pretends this session. In addition to that, so I think there's a breakout of those things, and those things are very different deadlines. Some of you have maybe heard about 45L instead of 90. These are tax credits, tax deductions. There are different tiers based on Energy Star and those qualifications. those things are, I've been kind of working through the works of what that actually means and how you actually deliver on those things. And then 190 is another tax deduction thing that people can pursue that got modified with the IRA. And so there are funds that people can pursue on those. One thing that I did hear recently by, and I would consult your tax specialists on these fronts, but if you're going after light tax funding, that may be more valuable than the 170/90. So just be mindful of those nuances. In addition, Multi is another tax credit type or tax exemption program that's available in certain cities. And in addition to that, a lot of you are familiar with the HCS format funds, which were officially originally the weatherization funds. We have Energy Trust of Oregon in certain parts. And then BPA also has a QPL program for certain markets not serviced by Energy Trust of Oregon. And by doing incentive work like Earth Advantage or other programs, you can qualify for upwards of $450 or $1,000 or $900 per unit for hitting those sustainability initiatives. In addition to that, some people are pursuing financing. So HUD MIP gives you reductions in your basis points, 20 to 30 basis points. I'm a former commercial banker, so that's why I have some of these financing things in my wheelhouse. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and CPOS is actually a really great revenue to change up your capital stack. So you can change the levels with something that has a lower capital cost, and that can help with the structuring of those deals. Now, I want to talk about some things that are outside the box because we're thinking about things beyond sustainability. So there's some programs, city programs participating in this and other communities as well. The first right of refusal. So we talk about bringing in affordable housing. One thing that some people forget about is how do we retain affordable housing that already exists? And there's conversions that are happening daily. And so one of the things that are starting to happen in certain cities is the first right of offer or first right of refusal. So that means that if there's tenants or other nonprofit private organizations, they can work through and actually pursue that before it converts to a private investor that might convert that to market rate. There's equity plays for opportunity zone funds. So I think that I'm kind of it's a sense that LIHTC does it, that micro loans really aggregates the construction, surface land, sales, or leases, use employment, profit funding properties. Streamlining the process for affordable housing. I've been noticing that equity crowdfunding for socially responsible projects are starting to make way, which is kind of an interesting idea. Another thing that's used in the UK is something called pop-up housing, where they take properties that are underutilized, like office spaces, and they create a kind of a space for housing of those spaces. They garden in those and give them for a discount. And so that gives another opportunity for it. So this is one of the ideas that we can kind of think outside the box for how we meet those that $500,000 or $500,000 housing units in the next 20 years. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I will just do a flash through. So this is the GRRP introduction of those things. They were going through the different types of elements. Those vacant elements do apply, so this doesn't have to be with their own wages. And it goes through all the different aspects of those. So as you're kind of looking at in your flash memory, as you'll be somewhere very in your mindset. A lot of slides. Oh, that's right. We'll test at the end of this. Yeah. So, yeah, I gotta speed you up through there. I'm testing Andrew here for the click. So many slides. All right. So passion led us here, right? And one of you or all of you wonder what those puzzle pieces that are at your desk are. So I like to do creative projects here and there, and I kind of got to my artistic nature. So at the back of those specific puzzles, these are for you to take home if you want to, as a keepsake. There's the word solutions. So you are on the solution. We are working together on this solution for housing. The equity, the sustainability, the financing issues, we will come together by working together. So we have to think about that in how we work together towards overcoming these trade winds that we're all facing. They are not insurmountable. We can do this together. And that picture, what that forms is this here. So that's the next picture there. So this is what, if we were to put all those puzzle pieces together, this is what that would be. It's the intersection of workforce development, funding sources, and the definition of sustainability. So I want to thank you for your time. We're going to open up your questions and get all the panelists up here as well. Thank you very much. Raise your hand or ask questions. We've got some mic that we could put around as well. Okay. Oh boy. Let's go. Yeah, go first. Give me the mic. So for the people that are remote.
Good morning, Mary Reno Mayor with Central City Concern. I had a question about the HERE program. Wondering if the intention of that is to roll it out to multifamily affordable nonprofit owners. So that, I mean, at CCC, we're looking at electrifying our portfolio, right? And we have buildings that are, you know, very old and newer. So seeking funding sources, and that looked like one that potentially could be for that use. So just curious to hear if that's the intention of that over time.
Yeah, excellent question. I would say there's no specific intention yet. I think that's one of the things we're figuring out is what's the way that we can deploy that funding to maximize the impact. So unfortunately, don't have a great answer on is that the intention. However, part of the requirements that were released by the U.S. Department of Energy require a certain percentage of that funding go toward low-income multifamily housing. So that is an area that we are going to serve with that funding. As far as what that looks like, we don't know yet. That's part of kind of our fact finding in these stages. But yes, that is absolutely an area that we'll be serving with that funding.
You should apply for PSEF.
We have PSEF dollars at Central City.
Hi, Heather. Yes,
Keep applying.
you should. So community responsive grants going forward is going to be specifically for retrofits. All new construction will go through the strategic initiative. So we'll be out. We're talking about a November 13th release date for the next RFP for community responsive grants. Just because you got one doesn't mean you can't get more. Okay.
Oh, it's my turn. JJ, I use they them pronouns. I am with Welcome Home Coalition. I really appreciate you all clearly stating what is needed to invest in this area, in this industry. But one of my bigger questions, as we're thinking about expanding the workforce and or training new folks, what are some of your recommendations specifically for folks who are wanting to get in? Because it's going to cost them to get these certifications and trainings. So is there any advice that you specifically have for folks who are like wanting to create that pathway, but then also for the folks in the room thinking about funding, because money is really hard to get here? What are your recommendations around making sure folks have those direct pathways?
So I highly recommend going to the Oregon Residential Career Hub. We've done like a really great job, I think, of defining what those career pathways are and like what are those certifications that are needed to kind of like start in the industry and then take it to the next level. There's also some great resources that have been put out by the Oregon Department of Energy on just green jobs in the sector of residential and commercial as well. And so really starting there and really understanding what are the certifications. If you are with an organization, apply for PSEF because they will pay for some of this training. There's going to be funding coming down from the Oregon Department of Energy as well as federal as well. Start, working with some of the organizations that are already doing this work. Contact me, contact Constructing Hope, contact Blueprint. These are the organizations that are going to be funneling folks into the sector and see how you can get involved on that side of things for sure.
Thank you. And then my follow-up question for you specifically, I know that you answered it briefly in our interaction, but the other question that I had specifically, something that I saw happen in these kinds of like programming and reinvestments is that they take a very interesting pathway sometimes, and they do some illegal stuff. Sorry. And I'm curious as to what mechanisms are being put in place to protect those residents so that they have access to those spaces at a fair rate that they can pay for versus like coming back to an increased rent and also like, oh, it's a new place now and that struggle. So I just want to make sure that there's some clarity on what is allowed and what isn't so that tenants are not yet again pushed into the streets because we wanted to make these kinds of investments, right? So I just want to.
So hopefully I'm not stealing some of your thunder, but there's a group that's doing a lot of work in the sector called Build Shift Collective. And they are working to make sure that they have tenants, rights at kind of like the forefront. And so they've come up with a kind of like standard, if you will, it's called the HEART standards. And they are really looking to make sure that, whether that's heat, energy efficiency, resiliency, temperature are all kind of looked at when they're thinking about owners or landlords coming in to do some of this retrofit work on the buildings. But with that, I'll turn it over.
First, I wanted to follow up on your question from earlier, which what I should have said is, yes, we will fund relocation fees if they're needed. We're not racing in on this unregulated housing fund. This is why we want to do a pilot, very acutely aware of the potential damage that can be done. And, our first, not only goal, but commitment is to do no harm. And so I don't know the answer right now. I would love to have more conversations and we're definitely in contact with Build Shift and working with the other folks at the city who are working on the HEART standards. But it's not something we're not going to race into this and cause damage to tenants. It is something that's weighing on us heavily and that we're talking with a lot of folks about. And if you want to be a part of that conversation, let me know.
Yeah, I guess my main question is like everybody on here is talking about, all of these multitudes of funding sources that are coming from all of these different places. And I'm in the industry and it still like confuses me of like who qualifies for what and what property qualifies for what kind of income restrictions do I have, what's new construction, what's retrofit. So I wonder if, any of you know about somebody who's working on kind of a central place where somebody could go and say, okay, what energy efficiency programs do I qualify for as, depending on their specific, circumstances? Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that question. That's a very important piece of this. So part of the piece of legislation I mentioned that was passed at the state level directed us at the Department of Energy to create what we're calling a one-stop shop, which is a central resource for homeowners or renters or just generally people interested in improving their energy efficiency to go to. And the vision, ideally, is that will kind of direct them to the correct source. So if they're in Portland, maybe that intersects with PSEF and we're able to send them there to get funding from that. Maybe that sends them to the rebate programs we've talked about, or maybe there's a utility program that's available to them based on their income level or whatever it may be. So yes, that's a kind of a core piece of that legislation, and we are hiring staff to take the lead on designing what that will look like. Again, as you might have noticed with several of the things I talked about, we're in the early stages of figuring out how that's all going to fit together and what that's going to look like. So the best I can kind of articulate now is the vision that I would like to see with it. But yes, absolutely a crucial part of this and something that the state legislature has told us we need to be working on and doing, and something that we want to make sure we're connecting with all our various partners. Because to your point, again, I'm also a professional in this industry and I'm not entirely sure where I would start if I were going to upgrade my heat pump. So I think that's crucial.
I would just add that I'm also the president of the Home Performance Guild of Oregon. And so we're looking to get those contractors who are doing this work back up into a space where it's like peer-to-peer mentorship, offering training, being able to talk about all of the different funding opportunities. That way we are in line and actually advocating for the contractors in this space as well.
And the only other thing, and this kind of ties your question in somewhat with your question as well. And, we all know the complexity of the funding of affordable housing, right? So you have federal funds, you have state funds, you have local funds. That's real. That's difficult. And then you have the complexity of like you talked about, the federal administration has all these goals and requirements as far as workforce and making sure that they're not harming the communities that they're supposed to benefit. And then you think about, to your question, how do we do that when you have all these different funds and all these different levels of requirement? Sometimes they contradict each other. A lot of times they contradict each other. You think about Section 3 housing, that's been around since the 80s. That oftentimes contradicts workforce training and hiring requirements. So there's all these different things. The one thing that I've always seen to like simply look at how do you impact the communities that you're trying not to harm is by creating more benefits for those businesses that are owned by the BIPOC members that you're trying not to harm within those communities. So for example, when I said not just solar panels, I love solar panels. They're great. But tell me the business that's owns the production and manufacturing of solar panels that is BIPOC owned. You can't, right? How many billions of dollars are we spending on that on projects throughout the United States, right? And so that's what I'm talking about when you're connecting the 3 pillars of sustainability. You can't just stop at but solar panels. How are we going to do that in an effective and efficient manner that also is going back to benefiting the communities that have been harmed? When you look at the tenets of most affordable housing projects, who are those people? Right? How are we creating economic opportunities for those people to, when their kids grow, to not necessarily have to be in affordable housing, to have choice of where they want to live, how they want to live. And that's when we break it down, what we have to do. It's complicated, but when you look at businesses that are owned by brown and black people, they hire at a much higher clip people in their communities. Just like other businesses, it's not necessarily that people are trying to discriminate. You hire the people that are in your community, right? So if you're a community member, you know the people that you go to church with, you know the people that you go, to work with, you know all those people. So when you promote more opportunities for those businesses to have opportunities, you're going to get better outcomes. And I think that's the connection that we're all trying to make. And it's really complicated, but I think that's a simple start. Look at those businesses that are getting the benefit.
How do we, I have a question for you. Because this is, PCEF is very focused on building BIPOC-led businesses. And like you said, we look and they're not there. We have a lot of money that I didn't even talk about going into workforce development. And then we have these projects that come along and they look for the resources and they don't find them. How do we connect those dots? I think that's a question probably across the board for you and James.
I think that a lot of times we think of workforce development and business development as being the same thing, and it's not, right? So I could probably point you to a lot of businesses that do exist, but they don't have the same opportunities as the business that have scaled. It's funny, I'll give you an example. Last month, we were having our Safe review with Safe, right? And it was funny because I was looking at our track, our history. And I went all the way back to 2006. And I looked at our mod rate in 2006, 2005, 2004, 2003, and it was 1. And I asked them, and now our mod rate, and basically 1 and lower is good, 1 and higher is bad. You pay based on that percentage. So if you had a 0.68 or a 0.56, you pay much less money on an aggregate of all your work hours. I asked them a question, why were we at 1 all those years? Well, those years we weren't big enough. So we were just set at 1. So we were paying much more as a percentage of our whole than our competitors that are much larger. So you think about that as it applies to insurance, you think about that as it applies to the ability to buy from Plaid Electric or to buy from any supplier and develop. So your costs are always going to be a little higher. And there becomes this like misnomer that minority contractors are more expensive. They're not. It's just that they have to buy things that are more expensive because they haven't had the same opportunity in the same amount of time to participate in this economy because they were excluded. So those are the things that we have to dispel from even our thought process and our language and understand the why and not just always say, they're more expensive. They're more expensive. And so I think you have to start there to start building like a plan and a path, and then invest in those organizations that are helping to scale and grow those businesses. Because I think a lot of those businesses are then going to help and grow those communities that they're part of. That's what I believe. I've seen it with my own eyes. Like if you look at our company, we employ over 130 people. 15 years ago, we employed like 10. If you look at our demographics of our company, 56% of the people that work in our company are either BIPOC or women, right? Tell me somebody else in the construction industry that does that. So when you give more business, and if you look at all the subs that we've helped to scale, it's the same thing. And I think those are the pieces that we have to really look at to grow and scale.
I'll just add to that. You know, when you're looking at, you know, raising that bar, if you will, and getting more people in the industry, we need to look at more than just getting people in at an entry point. Like, what is it as that project manager level, you know, with all of this? And, you know, as we know, there's a lot of reporting. So that administrative task, understanding that those are the other jobs that we need folks in the industry as well. That way they can then take those next steps to being project managers, supervisors, and so on. And I think also, you know, we have a lot of these programs where we have workforce development and getting folks into the entry level, not pigeonholing them, but also for those that are ambitious. Do you really want to open up your own business? Okay, how do we create programs to fast track them through that as well, right? Because those are going to be those next generation of folks who want to take the mantle and pass the torch.
We've got more slides for you.
I think we're at time right now. I appreciate all of your attention. And I do have another 15 slides. Thank you very much. Any other questions, please reach out to us and we can probably answer.